Hello. In the earlier part, we have seen about the French Revolution and slavery. What happened with the slaves due to French Revolution, we have seen in the earlier part. Till here, we have covered most of journey of the French Revolution. Now just we are looking what happened with whom. In the fourth point, we have seen what happened with the women due to this revolution. In the fifth point, we have seen with the slaves. Now, here in the last point of this chapter, we are going to see what happened in the everyday life, what changes brought it in the common people life. Can politics change the clothes people wear, the language they speak, or the book they read? If the political changes are happening due to these political changes, can these points also changing? People can change their wearing clothes, speaking language, or the books in a market or not? That answers we are going to look in this part. The years following 1789 in France saw many such changes in the lives of men, women, and children. In the all people life, the changes are brought. Maybe they are men, women, or children due to this revolution. The revolutionary government took it upon themselves to pass laws that would translate the ideas of liberty and equality into everyday practice. The revolutionary laws, the revolutionary government brought changes to bring the liberty and equality in the everyday practice. What they made, we will see in this next part. One important law that came in effect soon after the storming of Bastille in the summer 1789 was the abolition of censorship. What is censorship? Censorship is a approval, government approval. If you want to publish something, you have to take the approval by the government. That is the censorship. So the abolition of censorship. When the revolutionary government came immediate after the storming of Bastille in the 1789, they brought the abolition of censorship. In the old regime, all written material and cultural activities, old regime is before revolution. In that period, all activities or all the material to publish, it should be get approval to censor by the king. Books, newspapers, plays could be published or performed only after had been approved by the censor of the king. Now, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen proclaimed freedom of speech and expression to the to be a natural rights. That is why the censorship law is cancelled or abolished. Newspapers, pamphlet, books, and printed pictures flooded the towns of France and where they traveled rapidly into the countryside. Due to the abolition of censorship, much material came in a market. It said flooded, means we cannot count it more than the counting it came in a market. Not only came in a market in the cities, it spread through the countryside also. And this reading material, this printed material changed the mindset of people and brought the revolution in the French. They all described and discussed the events and change taking place in France. In this all material, in all this printed material, that things were described that was what was happening in the Paris or in the rest of France for the liberty, fraternity, and equality. These all things were discussed in this printing material, so it easily reached to the all people because of the cancellation or the abolition of censorship. Freedom of the press also meant that opposing views of events could be expressed. Freedom of press, may you have listened this word, the press should be have a freedom. If press should not have freedom, then they speaks only that things which are in favor of the government. That is why the freedom of press is a very important. When freedom of press is there in the country, the media is open, free to say, to criticize the government will not restrict to any press, any media. Freedom of the press also meant that opposing views of event could be expressed. If something wrong happening in a country, it can be expressed in the media through the media. That is called freedom of the press. Each side sought to convince the others of its position through the medium of prints. This printing material works a lot there. So the freedom of press is important. Freedom of press also meant that opposing views of events could be expressed. Each side sought to convince the others of its position through the medium of print. Plays, songs, and festive processions attracted large numbers of people. This was one way they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty or justice that political philosophers wrote about at length in a text which only a handful of educated people could read. When censorship was there, that time more material was not coming in the market. But after the cancellation of the censorship, the material came most in a market, the printed material which remained in the earlier period to read to the very few people, handful said it, means it is a very few people who were educated there. It was limited to them only. But now this is the freedom to the press. That is why it came freely to large section of the society. It spread the ideas of the justice, equality, democracy, fraternity, all these through this printed material. This is the picture shown here. You have to read this picture and the activity which said it, complete it, do it. In this way, the French Revolution brought changes not only political lives, but in the life of common citizen also it brought the changes. Maybe the women not get the political rights, but they got education, they got somehow freedom to oppose where to whom they should get married. This kind of freedom they get. The slavery also abolished after this revolution. So in all parts of life, the revolution made changes, not only in a French, but in the rest of Europe also, it brought many changes. After this revolution, what happened in France, we'll see here. The next change brought here, that is the Napoleon Bonaparte, the uh, military dictator. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He became Emperor of the France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries. Not only he became the Emperor of the France, but also his aim was to conquer the complete Europe, disposing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed the members of his family. He disposed many dynasties and placed that dynasties by his family members, maybe brother, maybe brother-in-law, like these family members he set there as a head of the region. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. Himself he was thinking he was the modernizer of the not only France but also Europe. He introduced many laws such as protection of private property and a uniform system of weight and measures provided by the decimal system. He brought many changes also, good changes also. That changes were welcomed by the people. People in the Europe were thinking, really he is a person who will bring the modern life to the people because he brought the uniform measure system, weighing system, decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who will bring liberty to all, who would bring freedom for the people. But soon, the Napoleon armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. But the Napoleon armies were seen as the invading force. It was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815. Many of his measures that carried the revolutionary ideas of liberty and modern laws to other parts of Europe had an important impact on people long after Napoleon had left. Maybe Napoleon defeated by the European powers, then also his some ideas were carried in the further period also. The idea of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. This spread from France to the rest of Europe during the 19th century, where the feudal system were abolished. Colonized people revoked the ideas of freedom from bondage into their movement to create a sovereign nation state. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy are two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from revolutionary France. It not made only changes in the Europe, but also it made changes throughout the world. This is the symbolic, inspiring revolution to the world.